Hello, this is Marsha Lecour. I am the host of Listen Up Men, and today I have a very special guest with me today, Lenny Revell. And Lenny has a very exciting background. And Lenny, let's jump right in. So first of all, introduce yourself. Tell us about the work that you currently do, and are you in fact aligned with your passion and purpose?
Well, I would think so because I actually feel confirmation if I'm on the path based off of the joy I feel doing it. So yeah, I mean, my name is Lenny Revell, and that's how you pronounce it. And it's a combination of right now music with um, alternative health, and I do these prana pyramids and pucks. Uh, they're basically small little pieces like this, and there's also a pyramid version in the other room. And they basically put out good energy to help you sleep better, help you protect against radiation from Wi-Fi, energizes food and water, helps meditation. People have reported better pain relief from menstrual cramps and migraine headaches. So I would say it's a good thing to put out a good spiritual tool like that for people.
Now that's interesting. I want to come back to pyramids. Tell us a bit about your music, your musical background.
Oh, well, I started when I was 9 years old. My mother took me to piano lessons after discovering that after each Sunday school session, I would always go missing. And she always found me in the chapel playing the piano there instead of playing with the other kids. So after about roughly 2 years of this going on, she said in the car one day, "Do you want piano lessons?" And I said, "Sure." So I started in fourth grade. I started playing, practicing the piano. And then one day I came home, there was a piano there. My grandparents bought me one. And from there, it just kind of boomeranged. I was taking them lessons on and off for years. And I eventually, what was it? I started playing in bands. I went to school for music, put out a few CDs. I actually played in different areas of the planet, and I met a lot of famous people. And then I come back to my hometown and I got involved with the pyramids. But the music thing has been a passion pretty much for a big chunk of my life. I was around 15, 16 roughly. I asked my piano teacher, what would it require to be a professional musician? And she took it as I was asking, what are the requirements to be a concert pianist? So she said, well, you have to practice like 8 hours a day, do like Mozart, Beethoven stuff. I went, oh, God, never mind. um, but then a short time later, I saw the MTV Music Awards and I saw Elton John performing with Guns N' Roses doing a song called November Rain. And that's what really, I said, what is that? Who is that guy? Who is that clown? Later on, I didn't know that later on that same clown became my hero. And I became a huge fan of Elton John, and then Billy Joel, and Tori Amos, Jerry Lee Lewis, and a bunch of other piano-based rock artists. And I said, that's what I want to do with my music. I want to go in that direction. I want to go into pop music, and be a singer and write my own music.
And so are you currently still writing to this day?
Uh, I haven't written anything new as of late because of the pyramid business, but I still play out. I get ideas now and then for new stuff. I'm probably going to put it together in a new album again sometime soon. Uh, it's more or less I'm trying to push the existing ones out the door first before I make room for another one. You know what I mean? Um, but one highlight I have to say though is back in 2007, I believe, they were going to come out with a Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man 3. So at the time, everybody was writing songs about Superman, but no one wrote one about Spider-Man. So I figured I'd do it. So between 2005 and 6, I wrote the song called Who Am I? And I took it to New York City and found the distributor for Sony. And he said that, well, unfortunately, because of the does not accept unsolicited material clause, we can't put it in the movie. So I kind of left feeling disappointed. But this girl that was helping me and managed me at the time, she found the guys in charge of all the Lowe's, Regals, and AMC theaters throughout the country. he loved it, and he put it before and after the movie, 6,000 theaters in May 2007. So it got out that way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So persistence really counts. Never ever give up. Never ever quit.
Yeah. If the front door is closed, go through the side.
And if there's no door, create your own.
That's that's another way of saying it.
Now listen, I want to come back to pyramids. I want to tell you well, actually it was an experience that I witnessed of somebody else with a pyramid. So somebody had this old basement, a pyramid, and under the pyramid they had placed a plant. So basically it was a three-pronged tripod, if you will. And this created a vortex of energy according to their understanding. So I actually saw the plant before they put it under the pyramid. They put it under the pyramid. This plant remained there under this energetic vortex of this pyramid. And by gosh, this plant thrived. Its foliage just magnified many times over.
Yeah.
So that was something that I witnessed with my own eyes. I mean, I didn't have a complete understanding. And to this day, I still don't have a complete understanding. But I thought there's something to this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so do you want to tell us about maybe the science behind that? Like what exactly is going on there?
Well, what it is basically you have a harmonic chamber that's basically a large funnel. The way energy moves is it moves in spirals throughout the universe, and it relays from planet to planet, from sun to sun. It comes from the center of galaxies through these tiny little black holes, and it actually comes out of tiny little black holes within a human body called energy meridians and energy juncture points, the largest of which are the chakra points in the spine and the brain. We know that in yoga and meditation. That's what we learn. So the energy travels in spirals, and what happens is when you have a pyramid, it's basically taking the energy coming from the earth through gravity, and it circulates it, much like when you flush a toilet, the water flows in a vortex. And as it climbs up the shaft, because the shaft narrows, it starts to speed up and contract in its intensity. So by the time it releases through the capstone, it comes out like a double helix vortex, which is basically the same geometry as our DNA. And it's basically one of the main energy signatures of life itself. So anything that's within the pyramid geometry within the pyramid gets basically a very concentrated amount of that life force energy being circulated through it. So if anything living in there will benefit from it. There was actually technology and research done in Russian pyramid technology. And they did a study on pyramids, and they found that when you take agricultural seeds and toss them all over the ground, you leave them there for a while, take them out and plant them, the yields were about 100 to 400% greater because of the force of this energy being concentrated into the seeds. They would throw granite in there, leave it there, come back and take it out and form prisons with it. And the prisoners were actually far more, they got off their drugs and alcohol problems, far more behaved better, and they were nicer and calmer. What else did they do? They found out there was actually at the capstone a way to use it as an electrical charge because of the nature of the geometry of the pyramid. And so basically, it's just a large harmonic funnel chamber for this life force energy we call chi or prana or ki in Japanese, 0-point energy in quantum physics, or orgon, which they use in orgonite. It's just the general name for the small pyramids that have the crystals in them and stuff. So anything that sits within this pyramid is getting that concentrated amount of energy. So it usually pretty much resets any imbalances within the living organism.
Now, so obviously you know a fair bit about this. You're well read in many areas, or at least in this area.
Mm-hmm.
Are there some books that you could recommend that you could perhaps just put in the comments after this interview?
Yes, I could. There's a few.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I can do that.
Yeah, I know I'm interested, and I'm sure other people would be interested. Now, Also, um, you're a strong, uh, let's say, Yogananda plays a prominent role in your life. Do you want to tell us
Yes.
about that? And first of all, tell people who Yogananda is.
Yogananda is basically the father of yoga in the West. He was a Indian yogi swami, God realized master, basically an enlightened spiritual master that traveled from India to bring with him the science of Kriya Yoga. And Kriya Yoga was an ancient technology used back by the ancient Indian rishis to achieve spiritual enlightenment or Christhood or Buddhahood. They're all basically interchangeable labels for the same state of mind or the same conscious state once you reach a high level of evolution. So one of the missions that he was sent here to do alongside bringing the Kriya Yoga was the original Christianity, which is actually not taught by most mainstream Christian churches.
So go
So
back. So rewind again. So say that again.
which part?
The part about Christianity.
The Christianity that most mainstream Christians practice nowadays is not the original teachings of Christ. There are some that are, but there are many that have been basically altered to fulfill the purpose of the ruling classes that hijacked his teachings after his crucifixion and when he left the earth. So what you're seeing is a mismatch of both his original genuine teachings mixed with other people's bias that want to control people through fear. That's why there's such a large notoriety for contradictions in the Bible, because you have mixed special interests in that book. And they're hoping that nobody researches it because it's based off of blind faith. So if you don't believe in blind faith, you're going to research it and see the flaws, that some things match up and some things don't. So there's some things that are real and that are true in that, but there's other things that aren't.
And so are you saying that you believe that Jesus taught Kriya Yoga, or that was part of his mission?
Well, there's a reason why it's called his missing years, because a man can only be written about if he's around to be written about.
Right.
So they say that in his missing years, roughly around the ages between, I think, roughly 13 and 14, he went on a caravan out along a merchant route to India to learn to perfect himself in the art of the Buddhas. Okay, so he went out and stayed, and he studied with the Jains. That was a group. He stayed with a bunch of yogis. I think the Nadi yogis. And there was a few other groups that he stayed and learned under. He had his own meditation cave out in India. It's actually named after him, and he spent a large portion of his time perfecting himself in this cave. But all these miracles you hear about him doing in the Bible are pretty much common among the most elite, spiritually evolved in India that sit up in the mountains. A lot of these God realized men. They could do all these miracles by walking on water, multiplying food, and healing the sick with their thoughts or their hands. Because what happens is when you learn the science of how to reunite with your soul, well, your soul is that aspect of you that's God. It's a piece of God. So when you connect with your soul, you access these special powers we call in India, we call them siddhis, Siddhis.
That's right.
And when you tap into them, you can do these miracles, and everybody else, well, everyone calls them miracles, but actually it's just nothing more than physics on a higher level than the material scientists would want to acknowledge, because they don't understand it.
Right. And so those missing years, so from my understanding, would be ages 13 to 30, because then it was age 30 when he went back to his family. And that's when we hear about, all of the miracles and whatnot that we
Yes.
read about in the Bible.
Yeah. So roughly on the average, 18 years missing to study the great yogic sciences, the meditation sciences, to study he was a big, huge student of the Bhagavad Gita, and he also studied the Buddha. So if you actually look at the Buddha's original teachings and compare them with Christ's, there's an amazing amount of correlation there, and you could see where he borrowed a lot of his ideas, because it's not necessarily Buddha's ideas, I guess, in one way, but it's universal ideas. So when you're a master, you automatically are attracted to, and you would adopt a lot of these teachings that are similar about unconditional love, forgiveness, kindness, peacefulness, renunciation, studying of the scriptures, self-denial, and on and on. These are the external teachings. The internal, more advanced teachings are the yogic teachings about the quantum physics that takes place when you master the breath, the energy in the body. You open up what they call the third eye in the forehead, which is actually the yoga passage in the Bible that's still around that a lot of Christians don't realize. There's a part that says, if thine eye be single, thy body will be full of light. Well, thine eye is singular. If we have two eyes, what's the deal? What it means is when those two eyes are raised to the two optical energy points that meet one ray coming out of the chakra point of the brow, we call Ajna chakra, then over time and through certain meditation, breathing, and yoga techniques, you'll see a spark of light with your eyes closed that actually magnifies and enlarges. And when you put your consciousness through that, that's when you experience angelic higher realms and God himself. And that is the first-hand proof of God. When people say there's no proof of God, that's it. That's how you do it. But it's a lot more involved than that, but that's one of the big things. In addition to hearing the Om vibration in the air, which is the Holy Ghost vibration of intelligence. The Holy Ghost is actually the vibration that holds all the matter-formed worlds into solidity. So that was his job. So when Jesus promised to bring the Comforter, he was talking about the Holy Ghost vibration that you would hear through a certain yogic technique.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. And so Jesus was really, from your point of view, a master who had mastered his inner consciousness and had ascended to, working through mastering himself. He had his vibration was at that highest level.
Yeah, and here's something a lot of Christians don't know. In the Bible, they talk about reincarnation as well as yoga. Like he talked about, for instance, there was a passage where the disciples said something about John the Baptist, and then he said, but they realized John the Baptist had already come, and then he realized he was talking about, I'm sorry, Elijah. They said Elijah has already come, and then he realized he was talking about John the Baptist. Because in the previous incarnation, before the incarnation where John the Baptist was John the Baptist, he was Elijah. And Jesus was Elisha, and he was his student. So in that lifetime, Elisha and Elijah could do all the same miracles as Jesus Christ. But what happened was Elisha was still working his way up the ranks, so to speak, spiritually. So at the end of his life, Elijah told Elisha, I'm leaving soon. Is there any last request before I leave? And he says, can I have a portion of basically your enlightenment? He said, well, if you're asking for it, it's very difficult, but if you see me carried away in a chariot of fire, you'll receive it. Well, that happened. And then Jesus realized he was going to reincarnate or Elisha realized he was going to incarnate again as Jesus Christ. That's why he asked for that. And so he could get that extra oomph of power so he could prepare the way and get through that life.
Now, interesting. So is this all part of the studies when one studies, let's say, the teachings of Yogananda?
Yeah, Self-Realization Fellowship is his organization. And when you learn how to use certain techniques, you could develop yourself to confirm a lot of the teachings that you read about in his teachings. That's the difference between his teachings and a lot of the other mainstream religions out there, is that most of them say you just got to believe by faith. He's saying faith is basically beliefs that are confirmed through experience. Right. And how do you experience things? Well, you have certain spiritual techniques you have to perform and practice every day. And then you basically learn to develop yourself where the things you read about become your reality because you're actually going through the emotions that make them happen.
And so it's not just woo-woo, but there are, like you say, these practical technologies that when a person uses them consistently and daily, then they are developing the neurophysiology, and they ascend to higher, and they experience higher levels of consciousness. I mean, we have waking state, dream state, sleep state, and then we have, there's cosmic consciousness, there's unity consciousness, there's God consciousness. Are you familiar with, so those, so anybody who's ever studied yoga and is involved in the active work to develop and master certain levels of consciousness know this to be true.
Yeah. Basically, we call it samadhi. Samadhi is in Indian, which is enlightenment, and there's various levels of samadhi.
Now, when you were talking about the cities, are those specifically the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali?
Well, Patanjali, which is one of the greatest exponents of yoga, talked about, I think there was 8 of them, main ones. I'm sure there's more, but there was different powers that come sometimes to a person that
Right.
practices, yeah, and it can happen. But the idea is never to make the powers the main focus because it can lead to the enlarging of the ego, which separates you from God. Because you start
Yeah.
taking on the role of thinking you're Superman, and then you stop trying to develop yourself. Whereas these powers are a byproduct off of the initial effort to try and reach God. You know, it's
Yes.
like putting
Yes.
God.
Yeah. That's a very important point.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're going to let your ego take over, then you become arrogant, and then you lose that connection with the divine.
I know this may be a silly correlation to use, almost Hollywoodish, but if you can liken it to Star Wars, where the Jedi Knights wanted to become one with the Force and learn all they could about the light side, and the Sith wanted to learn about the dark side. The Sith wanted to use their power for their own benefit, their own ego, so that they can control other things. Whereas the Jedi used it to defend themselves or to protect and add wisdom to people. So in many ways, it's like that. You have yogis that are climbing up the ranks to try and achieve enlightenment and achieve oneness with God. And then every now and then you have a yogi, kind of a rogue yogi, that will use it for their own advantage and go out straight off the path, and they'll use it for their own ego, and that'll separate them from being able to achieve the highest goal.
Fascinating. Wow,
Mm-hmm.
very interesting. And so you've been following the teachings of Yogananda for quite a while now?
Yogananda was the sole reason why I got interested in Christianity again, because I actually took a hiatus from it for a while throughout my younger years. I was pushed into it through Sunday school and as a kid, and then I went to church, and I kind of gradually shifted away from it because I thought that there was something missing. I believed in God, I believed in Jesus Christ, but I thought that the story was incomplete, and there was something that either they were purposely hiding or they themselves didn't know, and they were just passing on incomplete teachings. And sure enough, when I got involved with SRF, Self-Realization Fellowship, the all of those missing pieces would pop right out at me through the pages of their lessons and their books. And I said, wow, this makes so much sense. Because here is a man that can do all these same miracles as Jesus, and he did a lot of the same miracles. He was at a dinner one time, and he with a bunch of students, and he had guests. He told one of his disciples to go get the carrot juice in the refrigerator. Well, the guest came out with the pitcher and was half full, and he says, Master, I don't think this is enough to fill all the guest cups. He goes, pour it. But Master, he's like, pour it, pour it. Yeah, okay. So he started pouring the carrot juice in all the glasses. There must have been 20 to 30 guests. He came back, and the level of the carrot juice didn't change, despite all the glasses being full. So he was shocked. And then after while the guests drank some of the juice, he says, I'm sure they want refills. So he went around again, and the same thing happened. The juice level didn't change. So that's an example of something like that, where Jesus would make water into wine or multiply things.
Right.
It's basically using higher laws that a lot of people don't understand. You know,
and yet we all have access to these laws if we decide consciously that this is what we want to do.
Yeah. And there was another time it was raining outside, and a student was looking outside, and he was going to come pick him up. So he ran down the stairs with an umbrella, and he opens it up, and it's like bright blue skies, white clouds, sun coming out, and Yogananda, they're smiling, and the student's like, where'd all the rain go? And Yogananda smiled and said, that was for you. You know, it almost sounds like a cartoon, but
I know.
When you understand connecting with the universe, I mean, you have access to these amazing powers, you know?
So people have to be educated, first of all, to realize that we have these inner powers.
Everyone has the potential to become a master like that, to realize their full evolution, full spiritual evolution realized, if they were to do these techniques and follow a lifestyle that actually supported it. But most people don't. Most people make excuses and live a very poor lifestyle filled with alcohol and bad foods and swearing and, you know, basically treating people bad and, basically using a lot of their time for distractions and entertainment rather than self-development. So naturally, it seems impossible to the average man because the average man doesn't even aware of it, let alone if he was wanting to put the effort into becoming like that. Most people are just kind of sadly just content with mediocrity. They don't want to develop themselves because effort scares them. Effort, they just want everything handed to them. You see it nowadays. All the kids with the fast iPhones and the movies and everything is quick. Fast food is fast. Everybody's getting vaccinated. Everybody just, it's really sad.
And I think another piece of that is too, people don't want to sort of start their own path. They want to sort of, be with the group, be with the herd.
Yes, that's tribe mentality.
Yeah.
And people tend to live their dreams through the dreams of others' accomplishments because they don't want to make the effort themselves to make something of themselves. And that's unfortunately why we have these football heroes and actors and famous people worship. And these people are just like you and me. They're not special. They make more money, more people know them. And some of them might be talented in what they do, but again, they're just people. I mean, they're nobody like a Yogananda or anybody like that. That's a person that really developed themselves. And that's what we should aim. We shouldn't worship people. We should use other people's lives as inspirations to develop our own.
That's a good point. And so let's just go off here. I want to get into men's health and wellness.
Yeah.
What do you see from your perspective? What are some of the health challenges that you see that men are having?
Well, a common one once you start getting into your 40s and 50s is prostate cancer, enlarged prostate. People that don't tend to challenge the skeletal muscles start to have atrophied muscles. They start to develop erectile dysfunction. They start to have a decrease in testosterone levels. And that's a lot of it due to the body not being challenged. The body is challenged, it will naturally produce what it's supposed to produce. But when it's not sufficiently challenged, the levels, things start to go down. Your bone density starts to decrease, which actually decreases muscle mass. You're more prone to osteoporosis. Of course, if you're not exercising, you're not getting enough oxygen and nutrient circulation to the body, so your brain isn't getting sufficient amount of stimulation either. You're watching TV more when you're older rather than challenging your brain. So you're going to start developing Alzheimer's because it's not being used, or dementia. It's not only just the lack of usage, but the introduction of heavy metals into foods, like aluminum. They did a study and they found that aluminum was one of the most predominant metals found in the people with Alzheimer's. And that's because of the antiperspirants you put under your arm. The standard ones, they have aluminum there. Aluminum cookware. There's aluminum in the chemtrails that are sprayed by planes that leave those long white streaks in the sky that spread out into clouds. That we breathe that in, that's aluminum. There's mercury fillings in our teeth when we get fillings from cavities. Mercury is also a neurotoxin, which adds to the toxicity of the body. You also have, what's that stuff, fluoride, which is heavily in tap water. It's in your toothpaste, standard toothpaste. And people say, well, you need it to your teeth to be strong. So if you look on the back of it, it says, if you swallow more than a pint of this, or a pinch of this, call the Poison Control Center immediately. What does that say? And there's also another hour worth of research if you go to YouTube. Paul Connet, Paulconnet, I believe, something similar to that. He's a research scientist, and he's devoted his entire career to studying the effects of fluoride on the brain and the body. He says it's poison, and it's an industrial waste toxin. Yet people are shoveling this in thinking it's necessary for the skeleton or their teeth. And it's like, there's a thing called dental fluorosis. That's what happens when you got too much fluoride accumulates in your teeth. You start developing tiny little holes in your teeth. Well, if the teeth are the only exposed part of the skeleton, can you imagine what the rest of your skeleton looks like?
Wow. Oh my, that's scary.
You look like a big piece of cheese, Swiss cheese with tiny little holes all over it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's so much that people are not aware of.
Yep.
So what is one powerful tip you want to leave for men?
The the core cause of all suffering in the world is over-identification of the body. Because when you identify with the body, you identify with the ego or individual consciousness, which gives you the illusion of separation from other people. And that after that follows the fear. And from fear, that's the main emotion. That's a subcategory for anger, greed, lust, jealousy, and all the bad, whatever you call it, deadly sins. These are all manifestations off of fear, and fear comes from too much identification with the body. If man were to learn to spend more time identifying with his soul through meditation, through yoga, then he can actually start identifying more with love, which will empower him to not be limited with identifying with the body cage that he hauls around and thinks he's got to feed this thing and over pamper it. The soul is much more rewarding when you get bliss. Most people identify too much with sense pleasures, and that's why they're disappointed in, because their happiness lasts for a short time, and then it fizzles out. So they have to keep chasing after what it was that gave them that initial fix or high. Whereas bliss stays with you as you develop through meditation, through living a righteous life, a spiritual life, and being kind to people and helpful, and being selfless and loving and kind.
That's so a great I would say note. That's a great note to end on. Anything else you want to add? We could talk here all day.
The main thing that most people get confused about with healthcare is they confuse healthcare with vaccinations, pills, and surgery. Real healthcare isn't those three things. Real healthcare is a vegetable garden, a juicer machine, and a gym membership. Because when you are giving your body proper nutrition, proper sleep, meditation, exercise, then the body has all the tools it needs to work right. And then you don't get sick, you don't get hurt. These things become minimal, if not non-existent to you. The existence of disease is to show that one of those components aren't happening. So the body is responding by giving you a problem. If you give everything the body needs, you won't have problems. The body is designed to work a certain way. And people abuse the body, and then they accuse it of saying, well, it's genetics, or it's this time of year, or it's whatever. I need to get my shots. Animals and plants don't get shots. They're perfectly healthy. Mankind didn't have shots for millions of years. We've existed. Apparently, God knew how to do everything except create an immune system. So they misunderstand. The immune system is designed by God to protect you from every germ on the planet, and the only time it doesn't is when you don't give it everything it needs to do its job right. So give it everything it needs, it will correct itself. Clean water, nutritious food, exercise, meditation. All those four components pretty much cover almost, if not everything that you need.
And it's so simple.
Yeah. And simplicity is the key to happiness.
Yes.
It's only when we complicate things or try to pat ourselves on the back for being complicated that we get ourselves further away from happiness.
Wow. So I'm just going to remind you again, if there are any books that you want to list here for people to read, especially with Yogananda and this last piece here about the care of the body, that would be great. I'd be interested in seeing what you would put there.
Okay. Do you want me to say them on camera here or put them in the text?
I would say put them in the text, and then people in comments, and then people will have that as it's like a record.
Oh, I know it's a little off topic, but really quick. If you'll notice,
Go ahead.
If you'll notice in society nowadays, there's an over preoccupation with the body. That goes along with what I was just saying and why there's so much suffering. People tend to over pamper it by prettying it up with tattoos, or saying that people need to be less judgmental and accept them for their differences by going out of their way to get a sex change, or they'll dye their hair a certain color, or chop it in a funny way, or do all kinds of things with piercings and, trying to be artistic. Really, what happens is the body's natural biofield, its energy field, naturally runs smooth. When you start cutting into the body, doing all kinds of alterations to the body, it upsets the natural biofield and actually affects the mood of the person, making you more sensitive and over defensive. That's why you'll notice a lot of liberal-minded people, and I don't mean to go into politics, but I'm trying to tie this into the science. They tend to be people of this kind where they tend to be attracted to altering the body. You're doing interesting artistic things with it, not knowing the deeper implications that happens on an energetic level and a conscious level to the body when you do this. So, and then these people that are overweight, they say big and beautiful, accept me for who I am. How can you learn to say that, expect people to accept you for who you are, if you're putting foods in your body that are disrespecting your own natural order, your own natural balance? It throws your body off. Every fat cell you have holds toxins. So the bigger you are, the more toxic your body is, the more poisonous you are. It puts pressure on your organs and on your lungs and your knees and your throat. You can't breathe as good. You're in pain a lot. If someone really loves you, they're going to dissuade you from being big. It has nothing to do with your physical appearance. It has to do with the way the body is not supposed to be accumulating that much weight because it's not healthy. So how can you expect somebody to not judge you when you've already judged yourself, saying, I don't deserve to be healthy, I don't deserve all this, but then calling it healthy and calling it loving yourself? You're not loving yourself,
Yes. Yes.
right? You're not.
Totally agree. Yes. And I used to be one of those people who was overweight.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, I was probably about 35, 40 pounds heavier.
Right.
It's horrible.
Yeah. It's always easy to say, you're judging me, but people don't realize you've already judged yourself by your appearance. You've chosen foods and a lifestyle that have led to that appearance, and it's a non-healthy appearance and a non-healthy life. So it compromises your happiness. You try to hide it under all that stuff and acceptance stuff, but it's not really acceptance.
Yeah. And the other thing too, as a former overweight person, when a person is overweight, from my experience and my perspective, people are not dealing with their emotions in a healthy way.
Right. Yeah, there's too much of an over preoccupation with saying, well, you're supposed to cry, you're supposed to laugh. I mean, yeah, we have emotions for a reason. I'm not saying to stifle your emotions, okay? What I am telling people is that emotions are not dictated by what happens to you. They're generated by you giving your permission to a situation that's ideal or non-ideal outside of you, or to a person, and saying, you get to dictate my emotions based off of what you do or say to me. As long as you live with this kind of mindset, you are going to be a slave, because your happiness is always going to be dictated by random coincidence. Rather than saying, I choose my emotional state because I prefer to be happy, rather than say, well, it depends on what you say or do, then I'll be happy or sad. It's not that at all. We buy into it.
Right. And I agree with you. What I'm saying is, like, for example, for some people, Christmas is a very emotional time. And, you read people get depressed, they feel lonely, suicides go up. So what I'm saying, if a person is feeling anger, if a person is feeling depression, don't, squash that down with food. Deal with it. Deal with it.
One of the best treatments for depression is going outside and finding someone depressed and lifting them up, because you're helping yourself in the form of another person, and then you're not thinking of yourself, which is an act of selflessness. Same thing with anger. Find someone that's angry, help relax them, calm them down, give them assurance, because the anger is basically the ego not getting its way. The less of an ego, the less of an expression through anger. And how do you have less of ego? Less fear, more love, more acceptance, less need to control. If you don't desire to control, it's impossible to be angry, because anger is only a result of you unable to control a situation outside of yourself, an ideal situation.
So while we're here, can you mention some of those books in addition to listing them?
Yes. Hold on just a second. I'll go get them.
Sure. Okay. I'm just seeing if there are any questions here.
Okay. So there's two good books out called Pyramid Power by Dr. Patrick Flanagan.
Okay.
There's number 1 and number 2.
Okay, great.
So this talks about some of the technology behind pyramid energy and shape. Also, you have the complete pyramid source book,
Okay.
and it's by Dr. John DeSalvo. This one's one of my personal favorites. I actually ran this off online, and I put them in sheet protectors. But it's called Shape Power by Dan E. Davidson. Now, those are all about the pyramids and the energy around shape, geometry, and things like that. For the Yogananda stuff, the one book that changed my life was called Man's Eternal Quest by Paramahansa Yogananda. When I did that, everything changed. I was in a bookstore and I saw the book on a shelf, and his eyes were magnetic. It drew me. So I picked up the book and I sat on the ground and started reading it. And it felt like 10 minutes had gone by, and I heard over the loudspeaker, "Please bring your last purchases to the front. We're closing." I didn't realize I'd been there for like 2 hours reading.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So that's what started it. Another book from him is Second Coming of Christ. That talks a lot about the Jesus aspects of yoga and his deeper teachings about the physics behind it.
I had that 2-volume series. I sent you a picture of that.
Yep.
Yes.
That's literally like the best book I've ever seen on the subject.
Oh wow. I don't think, I think you'd asked me if I'd started reading it, and I think I said yes. And you know something? You know what I was confusing it with?
What?
I had read the autobiography of a yogi. I didn't crack this one open yet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a different thing. But autobiography is his most famous. But the Second Coming of Christ talks about, in detail, the science and the physics behind miracles, behind the hidden teachings and the missing years of Christ in India. Talks about all of the stuff that I mentioned, like with a lot more detail. So I would strongly recommend, if anyone wanted to know the real teachings, the original teachings of Christianity, to study that, because a lot of Christians, I don't know what the deal is. They think yoga is satanic because they think all these Hindu gods and all that, and it has nothing to do with that. Yoga is basically a generic term for the science of yoking or uniting the ego with the divine. And it happens that everyone comes with a body, and you need a breath. You need to breathe in order to live. So if you master the breath, which is the key between the spirit and the body, then you can bridge both worlds, and that's how you become a spiritual master, and you realize your full spiritual potential. So, but they involve all these gods simply because it's a representation off of, there's one God, but he has many different facets to him. So there's no such thing as, well, he's the old man in the sky in a chair, and he's always pissed off, throwing lightning bolts at people that act out of turn. That's really a cartoon caricature that someone made up.
I know, and that's what. But you have to remember, that's what a lot of us were taught.
I know. And
really,
I know. And the funny thing is that if you look at the nature of God, what is he supposed to be? He's omnipotent, which means he's all powerful, omniscient, which means he knows everything, and omnipresent, which means he's everywhere at once. If you have those qualities, it's impossible to be having all of that power confined to just one individual in the sky on a chair. You're basically not a man, you're consciousness. You're an energy it's formless. That's how you can exist everywhere at once and have those attributes to begin with. Our souls are basically mini versions of that. That's why we can co-create. We're basically co-creators on a smaller level, living under delusion, thinking that we have limitation. The limitation,
Let me jump in here for a minute. So do you think that Jesus was the Son of God?
Okay. Do you know why he has two names, Son of God and Son of Man?
I'm waiting for you to tell me.
Son of Man is the term identified by his body, Jesus. Or actually his real name, which we call Yahshua, because the word J, the letter J, only existed 500 years ago in the Greek alphabet. So his name Yahshua actually comes from Joshua. His real name was Joshua. But Son of Man is that identification of him as a body. Son of God is identified as the consciousness within Jesus that is also present within every God-realized master and is latent within every soul. The only difference between Jesus and the average person is Jesus activated his Christ consciousness and woke it up. If you look at, for instance, the Garden of Eden story, if you look at it literally, it's about two naked people in a garden with a talking snake and an apple, okay? But if you look at it from a metaphorical point of view, What it is Eve was two things. Was the collective name for the first generation of females, human beings created on the planet, and Adam was the collective name of all the first generation of men on the planet. Eve was also another metaphor for feeling consciousness. That's why women are known for having female most uppermost in their consciousness, whereas men has Adam or reason consciousness, where he had feelings regressive. Both of those two energies were supposed to equalize each other by working with each other rather than competing each other for supremacy. The garden itself was man's body. His hair were the roots. His nervous system were the branches. The fruits were actually the senses: taste, touch, smell, hearing, and sight. The snake was the kundalini life force that wrapped itself around the trunk of the tree or the spine. That was actually activated within the pineal gland, which is the small gland inside the middle of the brain that allowed for enlightenment to happen. So the very first generation of people were Christs. They were enlightened. But what had happened was God warned him that if you partake of the sex act, which is the apple in the midst of the garden or the forbidden fruit, that he will revive old bestial memories of inferior methods of animal propagation as opposed to the current way of reproducing for the first generation of people, which was immaculate conception through God realization, which was manifesting children through basically direct materialization. There was no birth through the vagina.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so what had happened was man did not listen and basically had sex, the physical sex. And what had happened is the energy that was fully activated, the kundalini was fully activated in the pineal gland, fell down the spine to the root chakra, which is in basically the tailbone, and also the sexual chakra, that area. And it lay dormant and sleeping because it basically made man unaware of his divine presence, because he started to identify with sense pleasures and the inferior method of animal propagation. So because of that, man started, his reproductive organs became more pronounced through use, and women's actually regressed back into the body, and he started having birth the old way, through like the bestial way. And so Satan, knowing that he can't keep man forever, holds man in the way that he keeps man in fear that death means annihilation of his full being, because that's the reason he rebelled. You know, they say Satan rebelled against God. Why did he rebel? What was he doing? Well, God put him in charge of all the matter-formed worlds. He was almost like a sister, brother, principal to the Holy Ghost. And what had happened is Satan learned that the divine plan was that all of creation would eventually dissolve back into the Creator, which would basically annihilate his individuality. So he got scared to hold on to his ego identity. Therefore, the only way he knew to stop that was to keep everything in permanent physical manifestation. So how do you do that? You convince man that he doesn't have any power, that when he dies, that's the end of him. So what is he going to do? He's going to be in fear, and he's going to hold on to physical possessions, sense pleasures, and thinking that that's all there is. And what does that do? When you die, that consciousness crosses over into the spirit world, and you desire to recreate those experiences and have those possessions again. That's what puts you back into another fetus. That keeps you on the cycle of reincarnation. And those endless cycles of reincarnation, every time you're born, you have to go through suffering as a man or as a woman, and go through fear, go through self-doubt, limitations, pain, and on, and loss. That keeps you in eternal damnation. See, that's what that means. Eternal damnation is forever being in a cycle of reincarnation. Yeah. So the way to get off of that, you become liberated or saved. So when Jesus was on the cross and he recreated his body 3 days after it died, he showed that he can overcome the body. That's how he, through his example, he shows us what we have the potential to do for ourselves if we follow the same training he did to achieve within ourselves the same results he got through his. That's how he saves us, not by dogmatically declaring him as our savior outwardly, but by actually living and following the exact teachings he preached, and to train the way he trained. That's how he's the same like us, and yet he's above us in that respect, because he did more. He went the extra mile, and he became like that. And he's telling us, I'm the prototype of the future man. If you follow my example, the entire world's consciousness will be lifted and
Yes.
suffering will be eliminated.
Yes. Amen.
Here you go.
Hallelujah.
So enlightenment is redirecting the energy around the sexual and root chakra back up to the spine, up to the brain. And that reignites Eden, Garden of Eden. You get that Eden, then paradise is again gained. And then man becomes immortal.
In this book, Think and Grow Rich, are you familiar with this book?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole chapter here on sex transmutation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of what you're talking about. In fact, it is what you're talking about.
Sex energy is life force energy.
That's right. It's all the same energy.
That's the reason why the media constantly plays to man's lower impulses and animal desires, because if it can keep you focused on those, you're not focused on enlightenment. Yeah. You're not focused on self-development. You're only focused on sense, impulse, and pleasures, and you're going to keep yourself distracted from your greatest potential.
The lower vibrations.
Yeah, because, you know, you're having sex all the time, or you're drinking foods, or eating foods, or gambling, or, you know, whatever. You're stimulating the lower senses, then again, you know, your attention and your focus is going to be that, and it's going to be taking away from the life force that needs to be concentrated in the physiology of a person in order to achieve divine realization. So people need to eat raw foods. People need to meditate. People need to shut off the TV, put down the cell phones. People need to learn to be kinder to each other, because they're being mean to each other is a reflection off of them being disharmonious within themselves. You cannot be mean to.
Yes.
You can't be mean to somebody else unless you're mean to yourself first, unless you're disharmonious. If you're harmonious within yourself, natural consequence is harmony with others.
Yes, and you don't need a research study to back that up. I mean, that's just logical, rational sense.
That's right. So,
and the other thing I want to ask you, so do you follow a raw vegan way of eating?
Not completely raw vegan. I would say raw. I'm lacto. I forgot the terminology, but it's ovo-lacto-vegetarianism, and I do about maybe roughly 85 to 90% raw.
So ovo is eggs
and raw dairy.
Okay.
So raw milk is actually a health food. The pasteurized milk that's out there is the reason why you have milk allergies and lactose intolerance. There's no such thing as lactose intolerance. There's a thing that's called pasteurization intolerance.
Right.
Because the thing that makes you intolerant is the lactase enzyme in the dairy that is destroyed through the pasteurization process. If you take most people that are quote unquote lactose intolerant, put them on raw milk, they actually drink it fine without an issue. If there's any problem, it's usually very, very small, rare cases where that isn't even possible. But most people, lactose intolerant, milk allergies, put them on raw milk, no problem. The allergies come from vaccinations or from pasteurized foods. When you cook something, you kill it, you destroy the elements that are needed to break it down in the body, hence where the problems come. It's no different if I take organic broccoli, I dump a whole bunch of high fructose corn syrup on it, throw it in the microwave, heat it up. Well, guess what? It's now a junk food. But are people thinking about it that way? No, they just see broccoli, it's healthy. Yeah. But it is a junk food because it's destroyed of all its health benefits.
Yeah.
But are you going to not eat broccoli because some fool doesn't know how to prepare it right? No. You're going to eat organic broccoli because, you know, that's the best way, or juicing it or something like that.
And so now I want to ask you about, I have to leave here in a few minutes.
Yep.
This has been fascinating. What is your take on juicing or fasting?
Fasting resets the body so it can heal better, it can lengthen life longer, because it gives the body system a break so it can actually reset and heal better. It also doesn't give the body extra work to do in the digestive system, so the energy that normally goes into digestion can go up to the brain and enhance the meditation process. Juicing is basically pre-digesting the vegetables and fruits for you so that your body can get 100% of the value of the food rather than only 30%, say, from a salad. And the reason being is because our soils have been depleted and demineralized through consistent abuse of pesticide, herbicide, and chemtrail fallout on the soil, and reusing the same crops in the same spots. So certain crops will use certain ratios of minerals in a certain amount and rob that certain area in the soil of those certain minerals in that proportion. So it basically leaves the next generation almost atrophied, smaller versions of the version that was there before because of that. So what has to happen is, if you go for instance, the best thing you can do if you don't grow your own food, which I advise people to do, is grow your own food. If you can't do that, you don't have the space, time, or place, then you go get organic vegetables, wash them really good, and you juice them. Because now it takes all of the inferior vitamin capacity that was there due to poor soil conditions, and it concentrates them into a juice. So now you got 100% of the value without the fiber. Well, people say, I thought fiber was good. It is. That's why I eat a salad on the other end of the day. But the juicing, if you're concentrating the nutrients, gets rid of the fiber because most of the nutrition is in the juice itself, not the fiber. The fiber crowds out the full potential of nutrients you could take that you would not have had you not had the juice.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that about the fiber. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Lenny, I want to wrap this up. So I really enjoyed this today. We went off in many tangents here, which is really good. Yeah, we talked about things that you're really, are passionate about, which is what I want to do.
And we didn't talk about the pyramids I make. We talked about the big one.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I mean, we've been here like almost an hour. So just a reminder then, just place the titles of those books with the authors in the comment section. And I want to say, Lenny, I've really enjoyed this.
I have too. Thank you so much for the chance. Appreciate it.
Okay, Lenny. See you later. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye now.